Stayed calm the whole time. That's the part people don't believe when I tell the story. They expect me to say I cried or screamed or threw something, but I didn't. I just stood in the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel. And I listened to my husband tell me that he had invited his ex-girlfriend to our Christmas party. And I nodded. And I said, okay. He thought that meant I was fine with it. I was not fine with it. But by that point, I had already learned that fighting with him was like trying to hold water in your hands. Everything slipped through, and you were just left standing there, wet and tired. So I stopped fighting. I started planning. Let me back up. My name is Abby. I'm 32 years old. I work in healthcare administration, the kind of job that sounds boring at dinner parties, but actually requires you to hold 17 things in your head at once while smiling at someone who is having the worst day of their life. I'm good at it. I'm organized, I'm calm under pressure, and I know how to read a room. I met my husband when I was 27. He was charming in the way that some men are charming. Easy laugh, quick with a compliment, always knew what to say. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, got married. The wedding was small. His family came from Ohio. My parents drove up from Virginia. It was a good day. I remember thinking, standing next to him at the altar, that I had made the right choice. I want to be honest about something because I think it matters. The problems didn't start immediately. We had about a year, maybe a year and a half, where things were genuinely good. We bought a condo in the Charlotte suburbs. I was promoted at work. He was running a small landscaping business that wasn't setting the world on fire, but was at least generating some income. We had a dog named Fig. We had a routine. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like ours. Then his business partner left, and the contracts dried up, and my husband decided that rather than pivot, rather than find new clients or take on a second job or even pick up some weekend work, he would reassess. That was his word, reassess. He was going to take some time to figure out his next move. That reassessment lasted 14 months. During those 14 months, I paid the mortgage. I paid our car insurance. I paid the utilities, the groceries, Fig's vet bills. I managed our health insurance through my employer and quietly added him to my plan when his COBRA ran out because I didn't want to have that conversation. I paid for Thanksgiving flights to Ohio. I paid for Christmas gifts for his family. I paid for date nights that he suggested but never offered to cover. I'm not listing these things to make him sound like a monster. I'm listing them because I think it's important to be specific. When people say she supported him financially, it sounds abstract. It doesn't sound like watching your savings account drop $4,000 in a month. It doesn't sound like lying awake doing math at 1 in the morning. It doesn't sound like the particular shame of realizing you've stopped talking about money because you already know how the conversation will end. His mother called twice a week. She had opinions about everything. How I kept the condo, whether we were eating well, why we hadn't had children yet. She never said anything directly unkind to me. She was too smart for that. It was always framed as concern. I just worry about you two. I just want to make sure you're both happy. Her version of happiness, I eventually understood, meant her son being comfortable. Whether I was comfortable was a secondary consideration at best. There was a woman from his past. I knew about her in the vague way you know about someone you've never met. A name that came up once, a city she'd moved to, a version of a story where she was always positioned as someone who didn't understand him the way I did. Her name was something pretty and forgettable. I'll call her his college girlfriend, because that's what she was. She had moved back to North Carolina. This was in October. He mentioned it the way you mention the weather, casually while doing something else without looking at me. She'd gotten the job in Raleigh. She was settling back in. He'd run into her at a mutual friends thing and it was great to catch up. I said that was nice. He said yeah, she seemed good. I filed that conversation away and I kept moving. In November, I started noticing small things. He was on his phone more, not in a dramatic hiding the screen way, just more present with it, more distracted. He started going to the gym again after months of not going, which I might have taken as a positive sign except that the timing felt off. He bought a new jacket. He asked me twice whether I thought his college girlfriend was the kind of person who would ever apologize for how a relationship ended. I told him I had no way of knowing that. He nodded like I'd confirmed something. 2 weeks before Christmas, he came home from running errands and sat down across from me while I was working at the kitchen table. He had an expression I recognized, the one that meant he was about to say something he'd already decided. And the conversation we were about to have was not actually a conversation. He said he wanted to throw a Christmas party. Informal, just a few people, our house, nothing too fancy. I said that sounded fine. He said his college girlfriend was in town and he thought it would be a good opportunity for everyone to finally meet her properly. I set down my pen. I looked at him. He kept talking. He said she was going through a hard time, a difficult breakup, still getting settled in Raleigh, didn't know many people in the area yet. He thought it would be nice to include her. Show her that people cared. His mother had already said it was a good idea actually, and she was excited to see her again. Apparently his mother and his college girlfriend had always gotten along well. His mother had known about this before I did. I want to pause on that for a moment, because that detail mattered more to me than the invitation itself. It wasn't just that he was inviting her. It was the order of operations. His mother first, then me. I was the last one to know, and I lived in the house. I said okay. I said that was fine. I picked my pen back up and I went back to work. He looked relieved. He said he knew I would understand. He said I was always so reasonable. I want to tell you what I was thinking in that moment. I was thinking about a conversation I'd had with my attorney 11 days earlier. I had gone to see her about something unrelated, a question about a property I'd inherited from my grandmother, some paperwork that needed sorting. But while I was there, sitting across from her desk in her office that smelled like good coffee and sandalwood, I mentioned almost as an aside that I'd been having some concerns about my marriage. I didn't lay everything out, I just said that I was starting to wonder what my options looked like. She was kind about it, she didn't push. She asked a few careful questions about assets, about the condo, about how finances were structured. I answered them honestly. By the end of the appointment, she had given me a folder of information and told me that whenever I was ready to talk more seriously, her door was open. I drove home, and I sat in the parking garage for about 10 minutes before I went upstairs. The week before the Christmas party, I did 3 things. I opened an individual checking account at a different bank from our joint account. I had my direct deposit rerouted there effective the following pay period. I went through every subscription, every automatic payment, every financial account I could access, and I documented them, not to do anything with yet, just to know, to have the full picture in my hands instead of only in my head. I also called my attorney and made an appointment. The party was on a Saturday. I spent Friday evening making 2 kinds of dip, a cheese board, a batch of cookies that I make every Christmas and that my husband's family has come to expect. I ironed the tablecloth, I put out the good candles. I made the condo look like a home, which is something I had always been better at than he was, in which I had long since stopped expecting acknowledgement for. His college girlfriend arrived early. Of course she did. She was pretty in the way I had expected. The kind of pretty that comes with effort and looks effortless. She was warm, or she performed warmth convincingly. She hugged my husband at the door for slightly longer than necessary, and then turned to me and said she had heard so much about me and it was so great to finally meet me. I smiled and said the same. His mother arrived 20 minutes later. She walked in, saw the 2 of them laughing near the kitchen, and her face did something I can only describe as settling. Like a question she hadn't realized she was asking had just been answered. She hugged me briefly. She told me the condo looked lovely. For 2 hours I was the host. I refilled glasses. I brought out more food when the cheese board got low. I introduced people to each other, kept the music at the right level, made sure everyone felt welcome. I'm good at this. I have always been good at this. I did it the way I do most things. Thoroughly and without complaint, and in a way that made it look easy. My husband and his college girlfriend spent most of the party within about 6 feet of each other. I noticed this the way I noticed everything that night. Calmly, precisely, without reacting. At some point, his mother came to stand next to me in the kitchen while I was slicing more bread. She said in a low voice that was meant to sound like confidence but was really a test, that his college girlfriend was such a lovely girl. She said she'd always thought they were good together. She said she hoped I wasn't feeling threatened because there was nothing to feel threatened by. I said I wasn't feeling threatened. She said she thought it was so mature of me to welcome her like this. I smiled and handed her a plate. The party wound down around 10. People said their goodbyes. His college girlfriend hugged my husband again at the door, longer this time, and then hugged me too, and said this had been so fun and we should all get together again soon. I said that would be nice. My husband closed the door and turned around with the expression of a man who believed the evening had gone well. I was already carrying dishes to the kitchen. He helped clean up, which was unusual enough that I noticed it. We didn't talk much. He seemed happy in a way that had nothing to do with me. By 11:30, he was asleep. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Fig came and put his head in my lap, and I scratched his ears, and I thought about what I wanted my life to look like. Not in a dramatic movie montage way, just practically. Specifically. What did I actually want? The answer was quieter than I expected. I wanted to stop doing math at 1 in the morning. I wanted to stop being the last to know. I wanted to stop being the last to know. I wanted to stop performing patience in a house where patience was assumed and never returned. The next morning, I got up early. My husband was still asleep. I made coffee, I fed Fig, and I sat down at the kitchen table with the folder my attorney had given me. Then I called her. I know it was Sunday. She had told me, during our last appointment, that she checked her email on weekends and that for situations that had moved from considering options to ready to move, I should reach out and she would make time. So I sent her an email. It was brief. I said I was ready to move. She called me back within the hour. We talked for 20 minutes. She walked me through the next steps. She told me what to expect, what to prepare, what not to do. She was calm and matter-of-fact, which was exactly what I needed. At the end of the call she said, "You're doing this clearly and carefully. That's the right way to do it." I thanked her and hung up. My husband came downstairs around 9:30. He poured himself coffee from the pot I'd already made and sat across from me and said he thought the party had been a success. He said people seemed to have a good time. He said his college girlfriend had texted him already to say thank you. I said that was nice to hear. He said he thought she and I had a real shot at being friends if we gave it a chance. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "I actually wanted to talk to you about something." He looked up. I said I had been doing a lot of thinking and that I didn't think our marriage was working anymore. I said I had spoken with an attorney and that I was prepared to file for divorce. I said I had tried to be thoughtful about this and that I didn't want it to be ugly, but that I had made my decision. He sat very still. He said, "What?" I said I could walk him through the general outline of where things stood financially, and that his attorney would be in touch with mine to coordinate the details. I told him the individual account I'd opened and that my direct deposit had already been rerouted. I said he would want to make his own arrangements soon. His face went through several things in about 10 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. Not of losing me, I don't think, but of logistics, of the condo and the accounts and the fact that his COBRA had lapsed and he was on my health plan and had been for the better part of a year. He said I was being impulsive. I said I had been thinking about this for 6 weeks. He said this was because of her, wasn't it? This was because of her, wasn't it? I said the party hadn't helped, but no. This was because of 14 months of carrying everything alone. This was because I'd been added to a list of people to inform, of people to accommodate, of people to manage, and I had finally decided I didn't want to be on that list anymore. He said we could talk about it. We could go to counseling. He said he had been meaning to get more serious about work, that things were about to turn around, that if I would just give him a little more time. I said I had given him a little more time. I said I had given him a lot of time. I got up, rinsed my coffee mug and told him I was going to take Fig for a walk. He didn't follow me. I put on my coat and hooked Fig's leash to his collar, and we went out into the cold morning air and walked 3 blocks before I let myself take a full breath. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was something closer to clarity, like a room you've been navigating in low light suddenly having the overhead turned on. Everything was the same. The furniture was in the same places, but you could finally see it properly. My attorney filed the paperwork that week. My husband moved out 6 weeks later, into an apartment his mother helped him find and, from what I understood, also helped him furnish. He got a job, finally. Some kind of operations role at a logistics company. I don't know the details. I don't need to. His college girlfriend, I heard through a mutual friend, had started dating someone else by February. I don't know whether he knew that when he introduced her to our Christmas party as someone who needed community and warmth and a friendly crowd. I don't know whether it would have changed anything. I kept the condo. We had enough equity that the split was clean, and I was able to buy out his share. Fig is asleep under my desk right now, which is exactly where he has been every evening for the past 4 months, and I have not once lain awake doing math. There's a thing people say about making decisions from a place of anger versus a place of clarity. I used to think those were the same thing, that clarity came after the anger, that you had to feel one to access the other. But that's not how it went for me. I was never angry at the party. I was never angry that morning at the kitchen table. I was just done. And done turned out to be the most powerful thing I'd ever let myself feel. I don't regret the marriage entirely. I think I learned things. I learned that calmness can be mistaken for contentment. I learned that being good at holding things together can become a reason for others to never learn how. I learned that the moment someone tells you that you're so reasonable about something that is genuinely not reasonable, that's worth paying attention to. And I learned that there is a very specific kind of courage in the quiet moves. The phone call on a Sunday morning, the new bank account, the direct deposit rerouted without fanfare. Nobody sees those. Nobody cheers for them. But they're the ones that actually change your life. The morning I walked out of the attorney's office with my final paperwork, I stopped at a coffee shop 2 blocks down and ordered a large coffee and sat by the window for about half an hour. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. A woman at the next table was on the phone trying to coordinate a school pickup and looked like she was going to lose her mind, and I remember thinking that life, most of the time, is just this small, complicated moments, one after another. And the question is only whether you're navigating them towards something you actually want. I drove home. I fed Fig. I went back to work. It was enough. It really was enough. I've thought about what made that morning different from all the mornings before it. Because there had been plenty of mornings where I sat at that same kitchen table, with that same cup of coffee, and felt the same low-grade exhaustion that comes from carrying more than your share for too long. The difference wasn't that something finally broke. The difference was that I finally stopped waiting for it to get better on its own. That's the thing nobody tells you about being capable. When you're good at holding things together, people around you start to assume the holding will just continue, not out of cruelty necessarily, just out of habit. You pay the bills, so the bills get paid. You manage the details, so the details get managed. You stay calm, so everyone else gets to be the one who isn't. And after a while, the assumption becomes the arrangement, and the arrangement starts to feel permanent, and you start to wonder whether being reliable has quietly turned into being invisible. I don't think my husband was a bad person. I think he was someone who had never been asked to be more than he was, and so he never became more than he was. His mother had always handled the difficult parts of his life before I came along. Then I came along. The pattern continued, and I let it for longer than I should have, because I told myself that patience was a virtue and that things would shift and that relationships required one person to carry more sometimes. That last part is true. What I got wrong was the word sometimes. There's a version of this story where I cry at the Christmas party, where I pull him aside and plead with him to understand why it hurts, where I spend the next 2 weeks trying to make him see. I know that version. I had been living adjacent to it for months, and I know what it produces because I had watched it produce nothing over and over in smaller moments before the party ever happened. What I chose instead was clarity, not because I'm particularly strong and not because I had it all figured out, but because at some point, exhaustion and clarity start to feel like the same thing. You get tired enough of a particular kind of pain, and your mind just gets very quiet and very practical, and you start asking different questions. Not, how do I fix this, but what do I actually want my life to look like? The answer, when I finally asked it honestly, was not complicated. I wanted to stop being last. Last to know, last to be considered, last to matter in decisions that directly shaped my daily life. That's not a dramatic ask. That's just the basic minimum of what a partnership is supposed to mean. And here's what I've come to understand since: how you treat someone is a choice you make every day, and the accumulation of those choices is the relationship. It isn't one bad decision. It isn't one Christmas party. It's every time you chose to tell your mother before you told your wife. Every time you said "you're so reasonable" as a substitute for "thank you." Every time you let someone else carry the weight because they were willing and you could. Those choices have consequences, not as punishment, just as arithmetic. You subtract enough from someone over enough time, and eventually the balance reaches zero. My balance reached zero on a Sunday morning in December. I made a phone call. I rerouted a direct deposit. I took Fig for a walk in the cold, and I started over with exactly what I had, which turned out to be more than enough.